Hi, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today. Today I have Melissa Sinanu and I'm Judy Teven, and we are excited to be hosting the webinar today about integrating your academic interventions with your social and emotional learning, or SEL, curriculum. Now, before we get started, I want you to know that we will be recording this and sending it out to all who registered. So we'll also be sending out certificates of attendance for everyone. So don't worry about that. Now, if you have questions along the way, please go ahead and throw them into the chat. Our Classworks team is there ready to field them. And if they miss any, we'll definitely have a Q&A at the end of our session as well. So let's get started. Let's dive in with a little bit of background. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, describes the benefits when SEL is central to the educational process. Now, the outcome is that teachers are creating classrooms where students are engaged, respected, and empowered, and of course, where they succeed academically. The result is that academic achievement, graduation rates, and attendance are up. Suspensions and disciplinary incidents are down. One of the keys to this next school year, and possibly beyond, is creating this atmosphere, whether learning is happening at school or at home. Now, this is such an important undertaking, and regardless of where your district is on their SEL journey, we do applaud your efforts. Now, in this webinar, we will evaluate how your academic intervention program should effectively dovetail with your social and emotional learning curriculum.
So first, what is social and emotional learning? Although chances are if you join this webinar, it's likely you're already familiar with SEL, we still thought this was a good place to start. You can see the definition here on the slide. And in a nutshell, these are the tools that both children and adults use in social interactions and to manage everyday emotional responses, right? Things like social awareness, setting goals, and taking responsibility for oneself are imperative to maintaining healthy relationships and practicing self-care. So CASEL's framework includes 5 core competencies. Today, we will look at each one and determine how to maximize the implementation of your academic interventions to also support student SEL development. Now, all recommendations do take into account the idea that learning during the 2021 school year will likely be a hybrid model of virtual and in-person learning. So what are the 5 core competencies? Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. As we progress through the core competencies in our discussion today, you'll see how they build on one another. So let's start with self-awareness. Self-awareness includes recognizing one's emotions and thoughts and how that influences our behavior. It encompasses accurately assessing one's own strengths, limitations, and biases. Self-awareness also focuses on developing a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. So this even comes into play when we think about subjects that may require more resilience to learn. How many people do you know will tell you they are not a math person because it was a class they struggled in at school, right? It's important to remember that just because something is harder to learn, it doesn't mean you can't effectively learn and apply the principles your whole life. So academic interventions are the perfect place to work with students on self-awareness and to foster that academic mindset. Now, why? Well, a couple reasons. First, while interventions are typically scored, this is also often a non-graded environment, so students are gaining confidence as they begin closing gaps and experiencing success in their learning. Second, they're also experiencing success because they're working on instruction that is customized or individualized to specifically meet their needs.
Yes, Melissa, individualized interventions can play an enormous role in establishing self-awareness. Providing students with an individualized learning experience means their unique assessment data is informing the activities they are working on. Now, in other words, students are engaging with skills that are most relevant to them. This is a time when learning can be at a student's own pace, which can be a significant stress reliever for students who constantly feel behind their peers in the classroom.
Judy makes a great point. If possible, the intervention you adopt should place every student along a learning progression at exactly the right level. Ideally, it will even specifically turn on the skills that are right for them. It's also really important that student interaction with these skills is not taught the same way their core curriculum taught it when they didn't learn it the first time. This can be really self-defeating for students. Ideally, the intervention will approach skills from multiple angles and allow multiple ways to demonstrate mastery of the skill. This shows the student that maybe I didn't learn it the way the curriculum taught it last year, but I can learn it and I learned it now. So as Judy said, select an academic intervention that individualizes learning for students based on data. This is a much more effective way to build student confidence and see students experience success and close their learning gaps than, for example, offering one standard intervention for a small group of maybe tier 2 students. With Classworks, for example, all learning is individualized for each student. They develop confidence almost immediately as they work at their own pace on the exact skills they are ready to learn. And this learning takes place anywhere they have a device and access to the internet. Furthermore, each skill unit in Classworks includes multiple approaches to a single skill and multiple ways to demonstrate mastery. What you see on screen right now is 2 different activities in a single skill unit. You can see how different the 2 engagements with the skill are. So then this success multiplies on itself as learning gaps are closed, students continue to gain confidence, and ultimately begin to experience success in the classroom. So a strong awareness of self is the first step toward social emotional learning. Because once students have self-awareness, they will naturally better be able to develop the next core competency, self-management.
Thanks, Melissa. Yes, self-management includes regulating one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations. So this involves managing stress, controlling impulses, motivating oneself, and setting and working toward personal and academic goals. Incorporating motivation and goal setting into your academic intervention program really helps students develop self-management. Many intervention programs have built-in ways for students to set goals and celebrate accomplishments, both at a granular level and like with weekly goals.
Yes, goal setting is so important. And there are some real benefits in looking for a program that gives students autonomy over their goal setting. You want something that goes beyond just celebrating every skill learned with a game, for example. Like, for example, a student might set a goal for 1 week to master 3 new skills. Then they realize this was not realistic for themselves. Then they modify this to 2 skills the following week. This is a great way to see a student begin to develop self-awareness and then effectively manage achieving their own goals each week, including making modifications along the way.
Another example of goal setting for students can be as simple as a student dashboard with weekly time and mastery goals setting built in. Now, for example, the My Scores dashboard in Classworks gives students an at-a-glance view of their progress toward their weekly goals. As they make progress toward goals, they earn a variety of badges and characters. Teaching students how to monitor their own progress, set goals, and make adjustments where needed gives them real ownership and accountability. This provides something very critical for students: more control over their learning, and important support when they feel out of control in other areas of their lives. Now, teachers also use the student dashboards to conference with students. This is the time to recognize their incremental accomplishments and celebrate them in front of their peers or their parents. And because it's digital, everyone has access no matter where learning is happening. Now, to more officially recognize students, Classworks has great certificates too. As teachers monitor students' rewards, they can print the certificates to celebrate student success.
Judy makes a great point about a digital dashboard for motivation and goal setting as an important aspect of self-management, but students also benefit from keeping a notebook for academic and personal goal setting. Sometimes referred to as a data notebook, a success notebook is a student-facing tool to build student ownership of goals, performance, and ultimately learning.
Yeah, data notebooks are great. Teachers have students track scores and set mastery goals, but also lay out behavior strategies or personal goals, such as organization or turning in work on time. These notebooks build student ownership and offer a sense of control over outcomes. Now, while there are many examples of student data notebooks readily available, at Classworks, our students use our Student Success Notebook. They set academic goals each week and write strategies for how they will meet that goal. Personal goals, again, are also tracked weekly. Additionally, students have a place to track their own progress, reflect on their efforts, and note if they have accomplished their goal or not. Now, teachers also have a section for feedback, and there's a space to add rewards such as badges and stickers. Now, for the 2020-21 school year, we will be transforming this into a digital notebook on our platform. That'll allow the goal setting and teacher communication to continue regardless of where learning takes place. Now, so far, we've talked about self-awareness and self-management. So now let's segue to relating to others through social awareness. Social awareness is the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures. This includes the ability to understand social and ethical norms for behavior and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. Social awareness includes perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and a big one, respect for others. Building social awareness with the students in your class can be challenging. Teachers work daily to make all students feel valued and value each other. Respect and empathy are vital to creating this type of environment. So, what happens when students start noticing the differences in their learning abilities? These differences often break down respect for their peers and even bring on bullying. So, how do you address this? One of the recommendations CASEL has for teachers is to use dynamic, flexible grouping in the classroom. Now, what I mean here is that although students may work in small groups during a lesson, those groups will likely change regularly as concepts change. Teachers can use dynamic grouping to help students appreciate that the class is always evolving to best meet their needs. Students are not stuck, for example, in a specific group all year and therefore labeled. Now, I think of when I was in school and we had like the red birds, the bluebirds, and the robins, and every child knew which group was the high, medium, and low group. Definitely not the environment we want for students.
For sure. But Judy, we always hear how tough this is for a classroom teacher. We hear that dynamic grouping feels out of reach when trying to predict who will need to be in a specific group as teachers embark on teaching a new skill. And this year, especially when we expect the gaps really to be all over the place.
We definitely hear this as a challenge. However, some academic intervention programs do offer the ability to suggest groups before you begin teaching a new skill or unit. They typically use a combination of existing data from assessment and student instructional work to make an informed recommendation for teachers. So I have a sneak peek of a dynamic grouping enhancement that Classworks recently designed for the 2020-21 school year. It looks at all student data, assessment, and instructional mastery to offer teachers a possible grouping before they start a new lesson. This was reprioritized as a must-add feature after we had done some research about the possible COVID slide that we've all been talking about. And you can expect that in the product later this year.
And remember, flexible grouping can be applied for skills being introduced virtually and skills being introduced in the classroom.
Exactly. So where does social awareness come into play specifically with academic interventions? Students are perceptive. They know when they are working on instruction that varies from their peers. In the fall, it's likely, as Melissa said, that students will be working at different baselines and will be working on a variety of skills. Students need to feel comfortable taking risks and asking for help. Teachers have the task of creating an inclusive, safe classroom environment, both in the classroom and online, and that's not easy. As students discover each other's strengths and how they can help each other, the strength of the group will build. Open discussions and demonstrations of appreciation build respect for others.
So Judy makes a great point about the classroom environment, especially during core instruction, but intervention times might look a little bit different. A helpful practice is to establish a specific enrichment/intervention period where by design, each student is working on individual skills. For example, some of our partner schools are establishing smart lunches this fall, where students will stay in the classroom and eat. This is a perfect time to work on individualized learning if you don't already have time in the school day dedicated to this. But by including that time each day for students to work independently on learning specifically for them, students gain perspective that we can all be learning the same thing in one class and very different things in other classes. And make sure, again, that the individualized learning period is part of both in-school and virtual learning.
That is really true, Melissa. This individualized learning class period is a great opportunity for discussion with students. Be open with students about the fact that even though they're all in the same grade, in some classes they will be learning the same things as their peers, and in others they'll work on lessons that are unique to them. This fosters awareness that every student's journey is just a little bit different. This really builds awareness that each student has unique needs and will foster empathy. It also removes the negativity that they may feel toward working on something different from their friends.
That's really true. So now let's take a look at the last two tenets of SEL. These are really a culmination of the other competencies, and they have maybe a less tangible link to an academic intervention, but we will still spend just a few moments on them. These are relationship skills and responsible decision making. So the first is relationship skills. This is defined as the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. The ability to communicate clearly, listen well, cooperate with others, resist inappropriate social pressure, negotiate conflict constructively, and seek and offer help when needed. So kind of in a nutshell on the slide there, communication, social engagement, relationship building, and teamwork, right? Now teachers are continually working with students on these skills throughout the day and throughout the year. Honestly, the individualized learning environment may actually be an opportunity for a student to put their headphones on and simply concentrate on themselves and their learning. This can be calming for many students who may get overstimulated in the ongoing group dynamics of the school day, whether that's in person or over Zoom all day. However, there is one CASEL recommendation that we felt really can be applied here. CASEL specifically calls out the benefits of having one member of a pair describe a situation to his partner and have the partner repeat what he or she heard. This is a really effective tool for students working on their reflective listening. So thinking about that individualized learning period, depending on where you are in your SEL implementation, you may have students share with a peer what the most important skill they learned that week was and why. Not only will it develop reflective listening, but it promotes the idea that all skills are important and we must emphasize and embrace the diversity of learning as it happens.
You know, this also reminds me how important it is to look for an intervention program that believes that the student, intervention, and teacher are all equal parts of that equation. We really want to make sure that students and teachers are talking regularly and often about student learning as they progress in the intervention. Now, for example, Classworks teachers use individualized learning dashboard to filter data to see which students are struggling. Teachers then conference with students, reassign instruction, and offer feedback. Classworks professional development actually trains teachers on how to conduct regular quick conferences, giving students real-time actionable feedback. A conference may look like a high five, a quick text, a teacher working through an activity with a student, or the two of them having a more formal data discussion.
Well, and also when we consider teamwork, many schools establish class goals for number of units that will be completed in a week or a month at a certain percentage. And then students and teachers cheer each other on as they work together to meet and exceed those goals.
I just love that, Melissa.
Me too. Finally, let's move into responsible decision making. Responsible decision-making is the ability to make constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms. So this includes the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions and a consideration of the well-being of oneself and others. So we see here on the screen, identifying problems, analyzing situations, solving problems, evaluating, reflecting, and ethical responsibility. So in our research and reading, we agree this is the penultimate core competency, right? The payoff of developing SEL results in responsible life decisions using the criteria in this definition. Now, your academic interventions are unlikely to directly tie to making constructive choices based on this criteria. However, the groundwork you have laid working with students is representative of the process they will undertake for non-academic decisions. For example, identifying problems and analyzing situations. As students have set weekly goals throughout the year and reflected on each week, they begin to develop a sense of what works for their learning and what environments are not as successful for them. As they begin to see what works for themselves, what types of goals are attainable, and how they feel if they set unrealistic goals and don't meet them, they begin to appreciate that there is a process for most things we encounter in life. Evaluating and reflecting. The Student Success Notebook offers a great place to track when and why they had successful weeks versus the environment when they had less successful weeks. The teacher can also help students make the connection between the process of closing learning gaps to decision-making about personal behaviors and behavior toward others. So today we have discussed briefly intertwining your academic interventions with all the core competencies of SEL. But really, no matter what your focus is or where you are right now, almost all SEL practices require an easy way to document academic and behavioral growth for students, including positive and negative behaviors. Many of you probably have PBIS in place already, right? And so with PBIS, student behaviors are tracked and discussed with students and SST members regularly. Many districts use a student observation form to make sure student behavior and engagement is documented throughout the day.
Now in Classworks, for example, teachers have a student observation section that includes an academic and behavior checklist and an area to add notes for documentation. Teachers use this to document positive and negative behaviors, like Melissa was just saying, and any overall observations for their students. Multiple teachers are able to contribute to these reports, and that really gives you a well-rounded picture of how the student is doing throughout the day. And it's sort of nice that the student isn't required to keep this in their student folder and then have the teacher to write in it at the end of every class period. Now, this can be printed and used as part of PBIS, MTSS, and the student SST meetings.
So finally, we do have a few general suggestions when selecting an academic intervention that integrates with your SEL curriculum. First and foremost, and it's not even on the slide, the intervention should be able to be implemented in the hybrid learning environment that we are expecting this fall. But then looking at what we put up here, for purposes of equity, if possible, adopt academic interventions that can be rolled out at the district level instead of school by school. Second, find a company that offers specific training on integrating your district's SEL initiative with your intervention program. This is really important because it's likely your SEL initiative is fairly new and teachers are just getting used to implementing these practices. So be upfront with your academic intervention provider about your SEL goals, share your plan with the provider you select, and ask for training that is designed to integrate with your SEL plan. If you are selecting a technology program for your academic intervention, there are two things to think about. First, make sure it can be used on any device, including a cell phone, right? Second, make sure it's flexible enough to work with your existing rostering system, student information system, interim assessments, and even your learning management system. Think about student and teacher communication and reflection. Make sure it can effectively take place wherever learning is happening. Select a program that allows students, and I think we talked about this a fair bit, that allows students themselves to set large and small goals, not just a program that celebrates every skill a student learns. Not that that's not important, it's just really different than student goal setting, right? If possible, a place where student success notebooks, student progress monitoring, and behavior checklists are all in one platform does ease the burden for teachers and students. And then finally, as we look at some pretty stark budget predictions, it's especially important that all district initiatives complement each other and that we avoid silos or conflicting programs. Social and emotional learning is going to be especially important this coming school year. And if you can successfully integrate the programs you use for your core curriculum, closing gaps, and enrichment with the SEL initiatives in your school or district, you increase the likelihood that students will embrace and apply these competencies at school and ultimately in life.
You know, and I know that our partners have really appreciated using Classworks as a support for their SEL practices. And we have appreciated all their feedback, which has allowed us to make enhancements to Classworks to meet student and teacher SEL needs. Now, if you would like to talk more about how Classworks can integrate with your SEL initiatives, please reach out to us and we'll be glad to sit down with you and chat about it. I do want to thank everyone so much for their time today. I hope you found this content relevant and really most importantly actionable. But we do have time for a few questions if any came in over chat or if anyone has any now. Okay, I see one in here about our dynamic grouping. So how does that apply when students are working virtually from home? Do you want to address that, Melissa, or you want me to?
Sure, no, I can answer that. So one of the recommendations that we've made in prior webinars is how important it's going to be when the return to learning to have all your resources for a lesson living in your learning management system. So if you do dynamic grouping for a skill, you can decide if I'm introducing the skill virtually, this group of students might work on the prerequisite, this group of students is ready for the differentiated problems that I assigned, while this group might be doing something different entirely and they're going to learn this at office hours the next day, right? Just thinking about, regardless of where learning is happening, that same grouping can apply to your teaching practices.
That's great. And we have kind of a connected question here, Melissa. This is from a high school population. And within that high school population, how does grouping apply without the social interactions face-to-face? It's kind of connected to what you were just saying.
Right. It's about the work that they do to master the skill. We anticipate that our pacing guides are going to have a lot more prerequisites built into them, and there'll be a lot more vertical planning and connections in the fall. And so it's not about maybe different lectures for each group. It's about how you're going to introduce the concept to each of those different groups. So it might not be a physical grouping. It might be something that's more about the materials that they're exposed to.
That's great. And I think that's connected to another question about our content. It is a K-8 content with a little dabble of high school content. But what we find for high school, like Melissa was talking about, you are really individualizing for that student, these particular students. So you can give them exactly what they need to be catching up on, prerequisite skills and standards. So that's really what you're zeroing in on for those kids so that they can perform better on grade level. Start working their way. Let's see, anything else? So other incentives besides the badges for older learners. We actually have had we have a lot of high school implementations, and they kind of embrace that, like that aspect of things, but then they take it a step further. So I know there was one that we were recently part of and are just hanging out in their classroom with the kids, which was great, where they printed certificates, put them on the wall, and then as students achieved different units and they kept putting skill after skill under their belts, they would add stickers to their certificate and eventually earned a field trip. So it's really about kind of integrating those initiatives that you've got going on at your schools to make that really work for those kids. So those kids were really excited. And in fact, that same group had talked to the new group of kids and said that the field trip was so great. So they were all really excited about participating in that. Okay, and we are going to be sending all of this out to you guys as a recording, and then again, a certificate of participation. If there were any other questions that we missed, we are going to be putting together like a Q&A document that will be able to answer all of those for you. We'll go back through this chat and make sure that we get everything covered, and we'll get that back out to you again too. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.